This is unusual for me because I'm usually interviewing artists that I'm finding out more about, and I do it on behalf of, as I always say, a public that maybe doesn't know much about your work, but you two don't need an introduction. So we're just going to turn it to the project, maybe. And Wally, you said that you had some backstory that you wanted to give.
Yeah, yeah. It was around a year before David Gordon. Well, let me start with it was 2021 or yeah, that must have been right. And David said, I have some performances, I forget where they were, and I'd like for you to be in them. And I was like, well, what are you thinking? We had not worked together a lot. We had first worked together for the Matter at MoMA, and that was the first time he ever approached me. We had been obviously in dialogue for years. He knew my work, I knew his work. We had a personal relationship. Um, and we had always kind of kept things separate. And this was the first time he said, I would like for you to do this. And so, it was a little bit of like, okay, well, let's talk about this. Like, what does this mean? We're crossing some boundaries here. And anyway, so that happened, and then over the pandemic, I was a co-producer on a couple projects of his, which were remote projects. Some of them were like really large remote projects, working with 30 dancers in Philadelphia, in 30 different locations with multiple, things coming in. So I helped him with that, and another work at Montclair, which was mostly remote, a little bit filmed on their stage. And so, anyways, I was not like someone who had danced with him for many, many, many years. And so when he mentioned this, I said, well, what are you thinking? And he mentioned some pieces. And then when he mentioned a piece called Times Four, I was like, what's that? That doesn't really ring a bell.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, oh, I don't know. Yeah, you probably wouldn't be interested in it. There's some video on the drive, and I had access to all that through the work that I've been doing with him. So, like, okay, I'll check it out. And I looked at it. It's a video of David and Valda teaching it to some dancers in the 70s, late 70s. The Matter is from 1975. And I looked at the video. They do the movement occasionally, and then the rest of the time they're talking and teaching it. But it was enough to see what the piece was. And I came back the next day and said to David, okay, who was that guy? What the hell? You did that? You put yourself in that situation? This is something I could never imagine him actually doing. And I said, that looks like a nightmare to do, and the kind of challenge that I would probably avoid at all costs. But here it is coming in front of me. I'm interested. Like, this looks very difficult and challenging, and I'd love to try this. And so then
I'd love for us to, at some way, you to tell me what did you find intimidating and but not right now. But what was it that made it like a challenge for you?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So we'll that later.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Molly has some stuff to share about that too. I hope so. It might just be me. So then we talked about it, and I was like, well, some of it is on this video. What about the rest of the piece? And it became clear that there is no video recording of the entire work of Time.
Mm-hmm.
So some of it was on the video, and then some of it is in Valda Setterfield's handwritten notes, which are quite cryptic. And so I think a couple days later, before I started working on it, and he said, I said, I would like to do this. And he said, okay, who do you want to do it with? And I said, Molly Lieber. And it's like, great, okay. And then I contacted you right away, and I asked, and you said, oh, yes. And I had just gone into the studio and begun to just learn a little bit of the video and the handwritten note stuff. And then like the next day about he came up to me and said, never mind, it's not happening. Fast story, we know how that goes. And then a year later, he died. And a year and a half after that, Valda died. And over the last year and a half, I realized that it had just begun to kind of float in my head and my consciousness about we talked about doing this piece. They're no longer here. I'm here. Molly's here. Um, also the fact is that neither of them had a memorial. Their choice, neither of them wanted a memorial. Knowing them, I was like, I completely got it. But I thought, I think that they, especially Valda, would be very happy that we are doing this piece and that we are performing something because she was the performer of performers. Like if there was a person who believed in like what performance can do, not just that, but also like the practice of performing, she was incredible. But I would try to be inspired by her because I'm a guy who gets very picky. Who's like, oh no, I can't do that. I can't do that. I would suck at that. That's not to say I get many invitations, but the few I would get, I'm like, I just don't think I could do that. And Valda would say yes to everything. And we talked about it a lot. She would just be like, you have to practice. It's just, you have to do it. You have to practice. You have to keep on doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Inspiring. So anyways, I'm jumping around a lot, but so then after I thought we should do this thing, then I contacted you and we slowly started working on it. And in case it's not clear, like only part of the piece is known, right, from the video and from the written material. So the rest of it we've needed to make up.
You needed to make up?
Yes.
Or reconstruct from the notes?
Yes. So for me, it's like a whole other thing to talk about as well. Of like, I've never had that relationship to making a piece. Some sense of like what it should be, and like whether or not what I'm doing is appropriate or, like, okay, am I now veering into new territory? Am I adhering to what it was that they were doing? Anyways, there's a lot to talk about within all of that, for sure, because it gets into these ideas of like, really, what was it anyways? Like on the video, what are we looking at? We're looking at them teaching it and doing some of it on the video. What kind of day was that for them? I'd like to take a breath in performance. Is that different than when they do it in rehearsal?
I'd like to take a breath right now because that's a very good question, and I'd like Molly to jump in. But what was it what does exist? Can you describe what does exist? This is the video. And then can you describe what maybe is important to try to help us understand what you have done with what you were left with? So what was it initially? It was a duet, correct? Why is it called ×4?
That we're not going to discuss.
Okay.
But you want to speak to some of the like what you saw in the video, like the qualities of it or something?
Yeah. In the video, they're teaching the dance. They're teaching sequences from the dance to, I think, another dance company. I can't remember which one.
Lane Summers.
Lane Summers Dance Company is coming to their space to learn it. So you do get to see sort of the different takes on what they're teaching from the different company members. And that's kind of helpful in terms of the interpretation. Then you also hear their commentary, and also there's little nuanced things, like you see the way that they react to each other as they're explaining and things like that. Because I think it's okay to say that it's all in unison, right? So it's all in unison, the whole thing.
That was the part that was a nightmare, but one of the nightmares.
Yeah. But why? Why was the unison a nightmare?
It's interesting. I guess I've mentioned that to a couple other people, and they're like, "You've danced in unison with people." I'm like, "Nah, look at it. I'm not dancing with people," and it's always like we have shared material, and it's the shared materials doing different things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like there's a friction between your way, my way, or interpretation, or variation, whatever. But to actually be trying to do things in unison, I know this sounds crazy, but I guess maybe I just haven't been in that situation as a dancer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Very rarely, like in Ralph's company, when I was, out of school and I started dancing with Ralph Lemon's company, there wasn't a huge amount of unison. You might share material, but you would do it, and later on the other person would do it. You'd rarely
Mm-hmm.
be like all together.
I see.
It's not something a situation I put myself into. And I
Noted.
probably wouldn't be very good at it, but
Molly, you were saying?
I think he's very good at it.
I bet he is. I'm sure he is.
Yeah, I mean it's a very specific kind of listening, and there's no breaks from it. So there's no, yeah, again, I don't want to give away too much, but I think it's actually, I mean, it's a very deep listening the whole time, I'd say, and also trying to kind of keep in mind this value system of this dance that was made in the 70s and stick to that, keep that value system alive. And how does that connect to the material that has been, I don't know, has branched out and or flowered from trying to keep that alive.
When was it first shown? It had very short life, didn't it? When did their version, was it toured? When was it made?
it
When
did
was it
tour. It
premiered?
went to Japan and Paris and the Whitney here in New York and some other places in the States, which was interesting when I began to look back and find the programs, because it was like, how come I just haven't heard about this one?
Hmm.
I think you know this other piece, Bill, like Chair, David
The,
Gordon.
the, the chair piece.
Yeah, the Chair.
That confusing. That's what I thought we were talking about. That
Right.
one I knew.
So Chair was made the year before. That was 1974.
I see. I
And I
see.
heard Cher talked about through all the years I've known David and Valda
Mm-hmm.
again and again and again, and the process of how that piece was made and why he started making it. All of these stories can be found on David's website, the archivography website. He really tells it in his own words about the making of Cher. And so I knew all of those stories. And so then to like when you mentioned times four, and I was like, oh, when was that? I was like, oh, this was the year after Cher. How bizarre. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit like Cher, I know was a lot of unison, but navigating working with a chair. And this is also, I think without getting away, like Molly said, it's unison and it's very pedestrian. And it was a little bit to me like, it's like he got rid of the chair, but he kind of kept on going with something that was being developed with those chairs.
So a couple of questions. This is really fascinating. I have to be careful with David's work with bringing things like this into it. Was it a relational piece? Were they, in fact, negotiating something between them? Why did the piece get made, and why were they doing it? Do you have any sense of that?
Well, first, yeah, anytime you're making a piece with someone, it's relational in some way. But I also think if you're kind of alluding to the two of them as like
they were married, they're a couple.
Yeah, they were a
Mm-hmm.
couple.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it was like another step along the way. Like they had begun that relationship, where it had evolved from Valda arriving in the U.S. from Great Britain, and David being someone growing up here in New York on the Lower East Side, and Valda. Eventually, other things happened too. And again, it's all on his website, so I'm not giving anything away that he didn't give away himself.
Mm-hmm.
But just kind of glancing through it, she went on to dance with Merce Cunningham. And he kind of found his way into dance. He wasn't really a trained dancer. and he began working with Jimmy Ware. He met Jimmy Waring, he began to work with him, right? And they were kind of what you hear so much about the time. So that time, like people were just around, and then suddenly they met David. And it was the most improbable duo. Anyone, I think, would agree.
Why would you say improbable?
I mean, their histories, where they're from.
But they were lovers.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
And well, I would say, like most lovers, it is a little bit like, how did that person and that person go figure? Which, yes, is the case with most, I guess. But
so they obviously had a kind of deep attraction
absolutely.
that happened on a lot of different levels.
Yes.
David was the one who was, well, you say was not really a dancer, but I think of David being the conceptual man, the choreographer, if you will. And Valda was an exceptional performer. I think she had distinguished herself in England she did music hall. She did a real training.
She was a ballet dancer.
Yeah.
She was
and I thought that she came to this country because of the invitation of David Vaughan.
Yep.
To get her away from the evils of the Le Monde Company. Right? This is the way I heard it. And there was something she fell in love with. So David was part of the package, but he was the one, in my way of thinking, he was the one, the idea guy. He had an idea about how art could be made, and she was a wonderful performer, and they were in love, and it was and I'm making this up. It was a convenient way for them to continue deepening their relationship, to make a work together. And who was leading? Maybe who led? We don't know that.
Like, I think on a superficial level, people would probably look at it and say, David was the lead. You know, he was the maker, and he would tell her what to do.
Hard to believe, but I can imagine.
Sometimes like, well, all right, we can read a little something to you in maybe a bit, which was an interview with them, and they're speaking about their process. But I guess I don't look at it that way. It's a little bit like this relational process, a personal relationship and a creative process had begun. And it's that question of like, but would David have made that thing and the way he was making it without Valda and the way that she was as a person, as a performer, and her tendencies? Like, did that difference?
And you would answer that and say, no, he would not have.
I don't think so. I think that I feel like the work became, some of that work, especially their duet work, was specific to what it was because it was David and Valda. Definitely.
And Molly, what's it like? I mean, are you two? It must be a real temptation not to. Both of them were strong performers. Both of them were capable of real. What's the word? Emotionless expressivity. Both of them, in other words, what do I mean by? They were like Buster Keaton. I mean, that was something that what do you call that when there's no expression in the face, but it's about something else. That's how I understand both of them as performers, right? And this work was probably very brainy. It was something that challenging to them in terms of the intellectual aspirations of it, and designed, if that's a word, for it to be a challenge to us watching it as well. Do you have a feeling about that, Molly, from learning it?
Yeah, I'm sure that a lot of what they made came from the dialogue between them around the work and the questions that came up and the particular ways that they both related to the material and how they related it to it together and how they related to it separately. And definitely for this piece, because some of what is happening is coming only from Valda's notes. So definitely, as far as how it's derivative, now there's segments of material that we have her interpretation primarily.
Well, the word pedestrian has come up.
Yes.
Is this a classic expression of pedestrian investigation, pedestrian movement?
Yeah,
And
can I share a quote of David's from that
please, please.
This is a quote that he either put in the program or he agreed, which is saying a lot for David. He agreed because he wouldn't have done it if he didn't want it. He agreed to have this printed in programs at that time, where chair times 4 was performed, lots of things. He wrote then, my current work deals with relaxed movement qualities. I jump, but not very high. My arms resting comfortably at my sides. I walk, run, lift my leg, but with no great urgency. Yet, I cover space. I still use, as I always have, repetition at the core of the work structure, repetition within repetition. An activity cannot exist in my work without its echoes, and each echo must stand alone as a complete action. My work is slow, concentrated, long, yet it is theatrical.
Mm. And is that justified, having gone into the work? Is that like gospel? Can you testify that that is true?
Yeah.
That does not conflict with my experience.
No.
Yeah. And also it's that thing of it doesn't conflict with what I'm seeing in Times Square on the tape, but also what I'm seeing happening in his work in the 70s. I'm not when I've kind of poked around and look at things through the years. I'm like, yeah. And you will hear people talk about also like David and Valda. They were amazing. They were an amazing art duo. And they were very different appearance. People would talk about how they appeared very differently. They seemed to hold themselves very differently, but they seemed to be on the same page doing the same thing. And it was theatrical.
And what do you mean by theatrical? How so? Character at the service of character, situation, feeling, what?
I think when you repeat a movement, especially in unison, if you keep repeating it, it's hard to not find meaning in it or to offer up meaning and so I think there's a theatricality.
And then when you
that way
have the movement and you alter it or change it and you're seeing it differently, you keep on altering those things, which I think of him like these echoes. And you're revisiting and rehearing things, which is something he did through his entire career. And at the end, he was kind of like always recycling material from the beginning of his working. And which he said he did. He's like, that's what I do. So there were those kind of larger echoes, not just within a piece, but within his trajectory of making work.
I'm reminded here of John Cage reporting Jasper John's response to I believe it's a Swiss journalist asking him about what his process was. He says, take something, do something with it, now do something else with it.
Yes.
So, and I mean, that was probably Jasper speaking in the 1960s, and these works were being made in the 1970s, but it was kind of the ethos of the era.
Yeah. And it's interesting, I think, right? We were not around as dancers then, but we, like maybe other people coming to the show, dance people, if they're coming to the show, it's that weird thing of like you somehow have a relationship to a body of work or a time of work, even though you weren't there doing it. You have these ideas maybe of the work that was happening in the 60s and the 70s and like the tone of it or how it might be looking. And I find all that really interesting because some of it is true and then a lot of it is not true. There's like other stuff that was happening that just didn't make it on the public record.
Could you give me an example? Because I believe that the conversation fascinating to me, but I'm trying to imagine someone who doesn't have any idea what it looks like. What is an example of a gesture or a motif that we associate, rightfully or wrongfully, with the 70s?
Pedestrian movement is what comes to mind. Pedestrian movement, like that word is used so much. It's been thrown around so much. And I wonder if we could you want to read this?
Sure, yeah, let's do that.
I found this thing last night when I was like, oh, I'm talking to Bill tomorrow. Somebody emailed about what to send you information, and I didn't send this to you, but I thought that it might be an interesting thing to offer up, because it gets into some of the issues that I think everyone who makes work, is a maker, and is working with someone who is, for lack of a better term, the dancer or the interpreter or whatever you want to call it. And also just like the dialogue of two people who are trying to find a land on the same page. This was an interview with David and Valda. They were being interviewed by Nancy Stark Smith in, did you say 79?
Yeah.
In 1979, and for Contact Quarterly. I'll be Valda?
Okay.
Okay. Times Four, for instance, was a duet piece, and the unison quality of it was very important to it. Therefore, your endeavoring to get it to be like you in its energy and in its shape, and the space it took was
right. The things in Times Four that really had to be dealt with very carefully and caused huge battles between us started with the very simplest thing. Times Four is a piece built with no use of your arms. Your arms are down at your sides, relaxed through most of the piece, except when you use them to get down on the floor or support you in some fashion. But there are no gestures in Times Four.
She's David, right?
Yes, right.
Just to clarify.
And Valda would hold her arms at her side, and I said, Valda. She said, they're relaxed. They're at my sides. David demonstrates, so he's holding his arms. And it took an enormous amount of work, because even as you were working, the arms began to do this thing. And then another thing was, I'm not a terrific dancer, and she's a terrific dancer. And when I make a turn, it's why when they write about me, they said, I don't have a dancer's body. I don't have an athlete's body. They can't quite figure it out. The movement seems very complex, but yet it's so ordinary. Well, I just kind of turned, and Valda would go, turn. And I didn't want that thrust in there. You didn't need all that energy to get around. So we just had to work on that kind of thing.
And those were the things that I understood. The part that was difficult was that you sometimes have a personal logic that I cannot apply to myself and my way of moving. And the only time I got really angry was when you asked for something, and you asked for it, and you asked for it, and finally I did it, and you said, there, you're doing it. How are you doing it? And I said, I'm imitating you. I know by now exactly what you want, and I'm just doing it. I'm being an actress, that's all. I'm being an actress moving. And I was.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Oh, one more.
Oh, please, keep going.
But there are times when you get particularly attached to the way you think some movement or some phrase looks. I mean, I don't use a mirror, so I don't know what anything looks like. I only know what I think it looks like. And then when I see it and it doesn't look like what I feel like, I think that can't be right. There's something missing there. And then we work at what that can be. And in some instances, it really is imitation. When I used to work with Yvonne Rainer on Trio A, and we would do something and do it over and over and over, and she would say, no, I want you to really do that naturally. And finally, I shouted at her one day and said, you don't mean naturally, you mean your way. This, I am doing it naturally. And in fact, you wind up with that in certain circumstances.
I need to have clear for me, to have explained to me the logic of the piece at some point. I'm loath to take chances when I don't have any clear sense of what the core is from which the chances can be taken. And sometimes David finds that I ask for what he thinks of as details before he wants to deal with them. And for me, they're not details, they're...
And then Nancy Stark Smith says the bottom line.
And to me, what's interesting about that is like it brings up like these questions of like, do it naturally. And I don't think I'm the only one that's been in that situation in a studio, right? Where someone's saying to you, like, just do it naturally. And I'm just like, what the hell do you mean? Like, if it's natural, like I would not do that. I would do this. But like this thing of using words to try to describe something that you want to have happen, sometimes they're accurate, but sometimes it's just a word that's used to try to point you the right direction. It's not actually what they mean. You know, like it might be that they don't want it naturally, but maybe they just want it really to appear more relaxed or something. You know what I mean? I'm not speaking for them. I'm just saying, like, in general, as a situation.
Well, I know that one of the, a classic example, and you'll hear this in many different places in the theater and definitely in dance, is to ask someone to simply walk across the floor. And because something happens, they just don't look like they're naturally walking across the floor, because they have changed. They're more self-conscious. But this is really, really fascinating. Now, is it structuralist? In other words, the repetitions I get. How is space important in this?
I'd say space is incredibly important. And it's nice. I mean, it's interesting on many levels that we're doing it in the space that they I think that is very special. But also you'll see when you see the piece, and I can't give away the certain thing about it that's very structural. The directions, I don't think any of the movements can be taken away from the way that they relate to directions in space. I don't think it's like you couldn't take the movement and say you could just do this anywhere. The movement only exists with its directionality.
And so it sounds like it's extremely site specific, even though you've said they've done it in Tokyo and so on and so forth. But what do you mean, though? Is it site specific? Is it somehow specific to?
I think the part that she's alluding to is that we are performing it in New York. They also did it at the Whitney, but the first place they performed it in New York was in their loft, in their studio. We are performing it in that loft, in that studio, 50 years after they did.
Whose decision was that? Was that yours, Wally? Was it together? What was that about? That decision?
It made sense. I mean, it was like an immediate kind of like, wait, we're going to do this. You kind of look at it and you're like, wow, this is 50 years later. And then when I don't remember I think Ain must have told me, their son, told me that, well, they first did it in the loft when they made it. Audience. We used to have, that's what the loft was used for. They rehearsed and performances happened there. And I was like, oh, well, isn't that where we should do it? He was like, yeah, absolutely. So like I said, it's a no-brainer. It was like, this is
and I hear that it's 50 people only? Is that what it is in terms of audience?
Yeah, it's pretty. Audience is on 4 sides, so yeah, we can fit a little over 50 people.
And it was meant to be very intimate and immersive.
Yeah, I don't have the information. I've always wondered, like when they did it in Japan, Paris, Whitney, or whatever, I wonder if they always had the audience on 4 sides, or if it was sometimes just front or different versions. Honestly, I think any version could kind of work. Obviously, the piece is slightly different than of an experience, but yeah, it's nice that we're able to hear.
And are you two enjoying these? I should say the specificity, as opposed to, I was going to say, these strictures. Are you enjoying the specificity of it? Does it give you insight? Does it give you propulsion into the work?
You mean just like the physical specificity of everything?
Well, you're saying it's on 4 sides. There's directionality is very important. And this is all gleaned from seeing the videotape and reading these notes, correct?
Yeah.
What's the nature of those notes? What makes them, sounds like they were essential to your process. What are they telling you?
Well, the first, it's like we got to look at a visual of them doing it while they were teaching it. So you're looking at some qualitative stuff. You're hearing David say certain things, like what he said in that interview, just like, no arms, just keep your arms at your sides. But then I'm like, this is the stuff that interests me as a dancer and also as a maker, and these questions of transference and how shit gets made. So he says that, and so I can look at the dancers, and some of them kind of like then keep their arms down. And then David and Velda will kind of do a little section, and you see their you see as they're walking, like their arms just kind of loosely, you know, moving.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, that's interesting. So you're kind of saying one thing, but you're doing a version of the thing that you're saying, which I see other people are interpreting it in a different way. There were some other things on that video that he says too that it's like there's certain things that are contradictions.
Yeah, like you just make this turn. Some things are led by just a part of the body. Some things are led by the whole body. How people interpret things like that is very, very specific.
Mm-hmm. And that would come from the notes you're saying, or from your actually looking at the work.
Right. So that we could look at them and see that and hear qualitative things, see the quality of the movement, and then we could move on to Valda's notes. And it was helpful that some of her notes are of the phrases you see on the video. So you see how she's writing that movement. So you have ideas of like, oh, when she says the knee goes forward, your head turns to the right, like we're seeing them do some of those movements. And then you have some descriptions, written descriptions of the movement that are not on the video, but you've kind of been put into some knowing sense of like, okay, this is what's important about the way you're approaching any of this movement, that help clue you in as to the way they're they might.
And so now I understand. This is fascinating. You said you invented, or did you say made up? What's the term that you said? What about that part? What was prompting it, and anything to report about it before seeing it?
I would say that I think Wally's work, I think he's very interested in directions in space. I might be wrong.
You can say that, yeah.
So I think that the work that has come out of that part, that reimagined part, kind of goes through that part of his choreographic mind that is very fascinated by directions in space and as well as many other things. But I feel that very strongly in what's being built, that there's a unison that is about a lot about really understanding how we relate to space.
Have you done it?
Can I just like what you just said though? It's interesting. It makes me realize, and I think the questions of like, how am I making this stuff up? I feel like, okay, there's this structure of like they are cardinal directions that they're working with. And yes, so clearly they're doing that. And David has some kind of history, or he's building a history with that. And yes, you also, and me and you, Bill, also have a history of like working that kind of directionality. Every dancer does. But your history and my history and how that is experienced and might come out of us is totally different. Like it will manifest itself in a different way. And I think I needed to kind of be like, that's just a fact. I am not David. This is not Valda. This is not 1975. This is 50 years later. We cannot even do it exactly the way they were doing it because we have different information in our bodies. No judgment of anyone better or worse. It's different. We've been raised in a different time as people and as dancers, and you can't take the information out, like even if you can really just do what they're doing, I'm still me doing it. And so if you think about the making of all of that directionality, it's kind of like, yeah, I have my, and you do, your relation, your experience and not ideas, but just ways of dealing with directionality. So you're definitely getting that. And I had no interest in pretending that wasn't happening.
Well, fantastic. No, just for a moment, just pulling out a little bit more, and because the piece invites this art historical approach. So, how have you performed it for many people so far? Have you? Yeah. I was going to ask you. Well, how
has it been? One person yesterday.
Oh wow!
Yesterday we showed it to one person, and
well, that's a frontier. Wow.
It is. And here we're able to sit in front of you and
well, maybe this is more a general question. This aesthetic, and it was an aesthetic, that now has two gifted interpreters who have picked it up 50 years later. Is that true? How is this? What do you feel about it landing in your time? How is your feelings about it?
I would say there's something, Wally's going to get mad at me. I think there's something hopeful about it. Obviously, every dance is a commentary on dance, always. I think this is a commentary on dance then and now, relationships, history, and I think it's somewhat hopeful. I think he's going to get really mad at me.
No,
But
all right, backstory, because she's always hopeful. I'm just kind of like, that's amazing. How are you able to always be so hopeful? But I love that.
I think there's something about who we are as dancers and where we are, and that there is, it has made me feel a little like, a hopefulness in this kind of embodied life.
You're encouraged.
I'm encouraged. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me think about, I don't know if I have the words for this, but different periods have all the elements of culture and life, and the people who are making it they make it what it is. And so to be touching upon and doing, trying, whatever we're doing here, we're doing it, we're not doing it, we're doing something new with it, all of the above. But like to be able to tap into, it feels like the will or something of the time. Like there was
of their time or your time.
Yeah, it's kind of like the will of that time. You're like tasting some kind of the spirit, but will is a better word because you're just like, wow, you had the wherewithal to do this and to be like, this is what we're going to do. We are doing this. The person who watched it yesterday, I liked what they said about it. They said, I mean, it might be a little challenging for people, but it seems more just like a gentle provocation, which I loved. I really loved, and I was kind of like, yeah, it's true. It's not, I mean, I think we would agree, right? It's not kind of like loud and in your face, but it's not like, trying to make you feel good, petting you and like getting you to relax. It's like, it's a gentle provocation. And I think I'm curious about what it'll be like for people to watch now,
Well, you've heard me, you probably, I think, Wally, you and I have spoken, because I'm always repeating myself. Art happens when something is being pressed against. Art happens when something is being pushed against. Now that's a kind of a restatement of something John Cage says about art is a protest or do something else. That's a John Cage kind of statement. So is it in fact gentle provocation or no? It is a provocation. And what if that's the case? What is it pushing against?
I had a couple thoughts that might take me somewhere. I don't know. One was I just had this feeling of whatever that time was holding coming out of the 60s. I feel like it's present. And it is interesting to look at what was happening then and where we're at now. And the idea of like, oh, it's just constant progress. And it's like, well, yes and no. The same shit keeps on coming back through civilizations and civilizations, and I think it takes me to what you said about like, but rather than it being just devastatingly hopeless, and giving up. And so I think there's something about when I was kind of mentioning the will that I experienced in the doing of this thing and having it speaks to, I think, a certain kind of will that is very much needed right now in our time.
The real kind of presence of staying. It's not like a presence where you can get lost in it, which is also.
Are you saying presence?
It's not a kind of presence to get lost in, which I love. I'm not saying I love that kind of presence, all different versions of that. But it's a kind of presence of being with each moment of a very, very long sequence, being with each moment of it together, and not like holding it. It's like holding it the whole time, and then also having your own experience.
I would also add, since it is now making me realize, like in the doing of it and will and these words and not giving up, that, you know, it's like, I really hope that I will be able to do this. And we've talked about the challenges of doing this piece. And
but we didn't really, we promised to come back there, and now we're there.
Here we are.
Thank you. What are is it memory work? Is it oddness of coordination? I don't know. What is that challenge that?
We talked a lot about it. I know, because for me, right, I was kind of like, I'm finding this really, really hard in a way that difficulty that I've never really experienced before, you know. And then she says, "Oh, it's so hard." I'm like, "Really? It's not just me?" Okay. It's kind of in different ways about it. I think that there's some structural things in the way that it keeps on going and yet evolving, that there's like and also it's just like there are four sides and you're always dealing with the four sides, or
is it very naked? Is it very naked because it is four-sided?
And that too, for sure, absolutely. And you're right there. All right, and there's no sound, there's no music. We're in unison, and I've said a lot to you at different times that what feels different to me is I'm used to doing something where there's another person in the space, there's a sound object in the space, there's an object in the space. I'm working off of something in a way that has this like friction and asymmetry, and it's very dynamic, or you know, it's like dynamic, subtly, large, whatever, lots of different scales. The constancy of this and the unison of it means that there's not that friction of being off from each other, and it's really disorienting, and I get very lost sometimes, and it's just a kind of thing I've never experienced. And, you know, and I have good concentration. I'm a pretty focused person. You know, all these.
I would say that.
I know that I like, you know, I've done, people like, is it long? Like, no, I've done 2-hour pieces on stage the whole time. Like, I should be able to, but there's something very different about, I think it's that the lack of other references. You can't be off of other things. You're really just doing it.
How long is it?
1 hour. Not that long.
Yeah, well, we do stretch time on stage, don't we? Well, okay. You guys are really, first of all, you're charming, great to look at, and I already appreciate the.
You too, Bill.
Yeah,
Let's compliment each other more. I think you really.
Well, you just take it, my friend, okay? Because it won't always be there, right? You know, because these bodies change, believe me. So you look good together. You seem to have a real rapport and respect for each other. Have you worked together before?
I've danced in Wally's work, a few different pieces now. Yeah.
So that's not alien to you, right? So anything else you would like a first-time viewer of work like this to come? You and I had this discussion, right, Wally? What do you want your audience to come prepared with?
How would you answer that question? What do you want for your? What about your audience?
No, I don't think they have to come. I think they can just. I think that we. I think we're open and available.
Totally.
In the present.
It's weird. It makes me think about the idea of being like, if you were to if an audience were to prepare in a certain way
Yeah.
or something. You're like, no, but like maybe you had a shitty ass day and you're totally stressed out, and this
Yeah.
piece is gonna hit your sweet spot, or just be like, or maybe it's
Yeah.
gonna be like torture for you. I don't know, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
maybe
But my point is, you
would
want to
go
say
either way with
people,
you, you know. And if I was feeling very like relaxed
Yeah.
and cool and I'm open for anything, maybe I'm too relaxed and I just like fall asleep.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. Just come as you
well, I was
are.
going to say, do you want people to say, please come with patient attention?
No, they don't have to be patient.
Come as you are.
Come as you are. I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So, but even though you said it's long and it's
Not so long, Bill. It's an hour.
well, David said it was long, right?
Okay, all right. I will add one thing. All right, we didn't talk about this, but when like we had the video material and the notes material, and it wasn't a huge amount of time, and I asked Ain, because he was there when it was being performed, and I said, how long do you remember this piece being? And he was like, forever. It's too long. And I was like, yes, okay, good. That's what I needed to know. Because there's something about like, you know, okay, it wasn't a convenient, easy length, right? There was something about it going on.
Mm-hmm. You know, Kathy Albright used to be at the Walker, and then she was at the Modern, and she took over the Rauschenberg, and I don't know what she's doing right now, but I remember she was looking at a lot of works through the New Dance Festival at the Walker, and she said, you know, the 70s, when I look at what you guys were doing, your audience was very patient. Now, you know, so this is a person of a first-rate contemporary viewer of art and performance. And I think words like, you know, it was David and Valda, you probably would not say indulgent. Those were words that many of us heard, and or that it was noodling around. That was another one. In other words, it was not experiential in the sense of I remember once Trisha complaining about another one of her colleagues, who I shall not mention. Oh yeah, she's doing this piece where I'm going to see an aura. I want to see the aura. She was with a little, you know, bit of a, you know, she wasn't believing this about she was going to see an aura, right? So there was a lot of room and indulgence, and people were more chill than they are. And I don't know who we those of us who love you and love David and Valda probably are, but I would sure as hell like to get a rambunctious TikTok audience in. You know, I'd like to get the young folks who are already, you know what they're like, you know. That I would be curious to know that this is a very important thing that you're doing. You're bringing something forward and you're adding your own brilliance to it. But there is something about this art. If a work is good at that time, it's going to be good 40, 50 years later. Do you believe that?
Good.
If it's going to be effective, I guess it's a way of saying, what does it take to transcend your time?
Sorry, I just hop into lots of things. Like there's transcending time and there's transcending place. Like that thing of how there are certain works that like have power and potency here, and if you take them somewhere else, it doesn't mean the work isn't good or that it doesn't have all those properties that it did here. It's just like perhaps those eyes, ears taking it in, it doesn't hold value, it doesn't hold meaning. Like it's just not, you know, I've experienced that a lot, you know, where it's like I can't see something and then suddenly something shifts in me or around me or something, and then suddenly I can see it again, and it's like the most amazing thing I've ever experienced in my life.
Right.
The first time I came across it, it was nothing. Literally, I just didn't. I was like, okay, whatever. I don't.
Okay, well, that you're very much of the camp. There's no such thing as a transcendent work, a work that transcends the specificities of place and time.
Not in all places and on all time. I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
Do you?
I don't know.
You're hopeful, so you might think so.
I mean, there's some writers that I keep reading their words again, and they are not alive now. You know, I mean, there's some works I think do transcend because maybe,
Mhm.
you know, I do think that. I still think that the audience is seeing this work now. First of all, I think it's a different work than it was in 1975 for sure.
Mhm.
And it does involve vocabulary that is specifically meaningful to this time. And then I also think that people seeing it now will feel very different than people who saw it in 1975 felt. So I think all those factors are at play. But I
Mhm.
think that's relevance now that's different than it had in 1970.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, I don't know, maybe you're not of that bent, but many of us are hoping that in our life we can make one, maybe two works that someone will be interested in 100 years. Now, I don't assume that they will, but then I look around, I see what has survived, and I wonder what that is. So that's a perverse and I think distracting preoccupation if you want to make work. I think you just implied, Molly, there's something that you love about performance when there's an opportunity to feel the moment. That moment is unlike anything else, and that is, I call that a spiritual moment, a spiritual dimension to something. And you hope that you have performers who are custodians of that spirituality. And I think you two both are. Why don't I get unpacked? I just got, can you believe it? Just got to people's house where I've never been in the house before, and I'm down in the basement here doing this conversation. They will dig it, though. I'll tell them. But thank you very much, and we're really excited to have you in the space and to see it. And blessings to you both.
Thank you, Bill.
Bye bye now.